Hi everybody. Today I'm going to be doing a hive inspection on the colony that we recovered from a tree that was toppled by a storm in the cemetery behind our house. And those who follow our Facebook page know that, saw the pictures of this. This was on July 12th and 13th, caught the swarm on July 12th and installed them into our hive on the 13th.
This is a flashback to July 12th when we originally caught this swarm. This is a large oak tree that had been split by a windstorm, and a large section which contained a hive had fallen. It's in the cemetery behind our house. The bees swarmed from that hive and collected on this branch where they were sending out scouts looking for a new location. Because the branch was low to the ground, I was able to pretty easily sweep them into my swarm trap using a bee brush, which has soft bristles. Doesn't really hurt the bees, not that they like it all that much. But I was able to sweep the majority into the box, and by doing this, I knew that either I would get the queen in the box, or she would be remaining with the smaller number of bees on the branch, where I should be able to find her pretty easily. So at this point, I'm just trying to get most of that cluster into my box. You can see that big cluster that was there is mostly gone, except for the bees that are moving to the top of the branch. And as it turns out, once I set down my box and looked on top of there, I was able to spot the queen pretty quickly, put her in a queen clip, and put that clip inside of the hive with the bees I'd already caught. By putting her in there, the bees that were there would send out an attractant pheromone that would signal the rest of the bees that weren't yet inside the box to come to the box. And once they got that signal, the bees started moving pretty quickly. And you can see that they start marching into the box. It's kind of a flow, almost like water down a drain, as the bees march in to get into the entrance with the rest of the colony and the queen.
If you don't follow the Facebook page, I'll put the link in the description of this video so that you can find that page. And if you're interested in seeing our progress of how we got to where we are in beekeeping, you can go see the posts on that page and follow. And I appreciate any likes and follows of the page to see what's coming up. You may notice a little smoke coming across here. I got my smoker sitting over here ready to go, and that's where the smoke is from. So this colony was caught on July 12th and installed on July 13th. I did an inspection on them on July 26th, which was 2 weeks after the initial catch. And on that inspection, I found that they had built out two frames of comb pretty well. Had quite a bit of brood in those frames, had some honey stored up in one of the frames, and were doing pretty well, had pretty good brood on those. So now we are at a week and 6 days since that initial catch, or a week and 5 days since they were installed in this hive. And that, I'm sorry, 3 weeks and 5 days. And that's critical because when we hit that 3-week point, that 21-day point, from the time the queen lays the first eggs, that's when the brood will start emerging. It takes 21 days for a worker bee to go from a new egg being laid to hatching, becoming a larva, that going into the pupa stage when those cells will be capped over, and then emerging. So 21 days for a worker. So what I expect to see coming in here, at last inspection, almost 2 weeks ago, there were 2 frames built out. I'm hoping to see more frames built out than that. If it looks like they're doing a slow job of building out, then I may add a frame feeder in here, and I'll say a couple words about that. My philosophy of beekeeping goes along with natural beekeeping principles. And along with that, I generally am not a big proponent of feeding. A lot of beekeepers just feed reflexively. You put the bees in the hive, you give them a feeder. And a lot of people say keep feeding until they stop taking feed. I believe bees do fine in the natural world. They are able to find their food, survive through the summer, prepare for winter, and they don't generally need feeding unless something's going on that is outside of their natural processes. In this case, this is a hive that was strong, living in a tree, don't know how long they'd been there, but based on the comb in the tree, they'd probably been there a while and had been surviving well, and then they were suddenly evicted when the storm put the tree down. So they left the hive with nothing but the resources they could carry with them, meaning the bees will load up with honey from their original colony when they go out to swarm, and and they use that honey to start building comb. And they make the wax from the honey that they have stored up. So they were doing a pretty good job of that, but they had none of the other, everything else that was in that hive got left behind. And in July and later in the year, a colony that swarms has a reduced likelihood of survival, because we're going into our dearth period, which in late July, August, and then into early September, which is when we have a lower than normal natural nectar flow, meaning the bees will have a harder time finding enough nectar to keep up with the demands of their colony. So because they have that unnatural situation of being thrust out of their hive, being put into here, I'll try to help them along and make sure that they're prepared for winter, and in that case I will give them a feeder. I did actually give them one frame feeder before. I took it out at the last inspection, and they had cleaned it up, used it up in building their comb. So we'll see how they're doing. And if they are, let's say if they have doubled in size, I will probably just let them go as they are and check back in a few more weeks. But if they are, seem to be kind of lagging, not too far beyond where they were, I'll go ahead and give them a feeder and let them build up. I will mention there hasn't been a lot of traffic at the entrance lately. A few bees in and out. It's been fairly regular, but it's not lots of bees in and out. And that's not surprising to me, because they have gone, they didn't have any brood. Any brood that was in the tree was left there. And so they have that break where they don't have any new brood emerging to replace any of the older bees that are dying off. So because of that, I don't expect there to be, I have seen a few orientation flights where new forager bees are coming out and swirling around, finding, getting themselves oriented to the hive so that they can go and come back to it. And so that's encouraging, but there's still not a huge population of forager bees going in and out. And however, because there was strong brood at the last inspection, that doesn't concern me. I think the hive is going to hold its own in terms of numbers. I just want to give them enough resources to feed those numbers and to build out wax and prepare for winter. So that's where we are at. They look pretty good, like I said last time. We'll see where they're at now, and I'll kind of take you along and kind of show you what's going on in here. So we'll open this up. Now this hive actually contains 2 colonies. It originally, in this end of the hive, contained a split that I made off of my original colony, and in the other end is where I put the bees from that tree. So nice thing about the lay-ins hive is we can, have enough space to put in a couple colonies as long as they're not really big. Now, next year I probably won't have that benefit, because I'm hoping once they get through winter and start building up right away and already have their resource, the comb built out from the last year, they should build up their numbers pretty quickly and run out of space. So I'm going to have to, move some of these out and give everybody a single room, so to speak. All right, so when I put this colony in here, when I already had the split colony in here and I put the colony from the tree in here, I made this single piece cover board kind of quickly, so 1-piece cover board, and that's just to prevent the bees. I have divider boards in here. I have a divider board at the end of each set of frames, but those dividers have a gap at the end, so the bees can go underneath into the empty part of the hive. I also have a full-length divider board in here that, full length goes all the way to the bottom. The bees can't get past it, so it blocks from side to side, but it doesn't block on the top, so it wouldn't keep bees from one colony from going over to the other and potentially fighting with the other colony. So so I made this 1-piece cover board that I can put on top, has some vents on it, and will keep the bees on their own sides. And as expected, it's propolized down, so I'm going to use my hive tool and pry it. Got a few bees checking out what's going on here. Got some ants over here. Alright, So I'll just set this cover board over here so it'll cover up the hive that we're not inspecting, keep them in their place and keep them from mixing and potentially fighting here. All right, so the bees are kind of milling around in here. We'll crack this just a little bit, give them just a little smoke just for good measure, but I don't think it's really going to be necessary. So I puff a little smoke in there and then close it up. And what the smoke does, a lot of people are familiar with the beekeepers using smoke. They've been using it for centuries. And what smoke does is it signals the bees that, hey, you know, our home is on fire. And, you know, bees naturally living in trees, you know, it gives the idea, you know, causes a reaction as if their tree was on fire. And so if their tree is on fire, what are they going to have to do? They have to evacuate. Well, I don't want them to evacuate, but I want them to prepare as if they would. So what they're going to do to prepare, if they're going to evacuate, they have to take their resources with them. They have to eat up, you know, fill their bellies with nectar and so on. So, right now, puff a little smoke in there. So those bees that have been smoked are going to start filling up their bellies. And, you know, like you and I on Thanksgiving afternoon, they'll be a little bit more sluggish and a little more calm and less prone to stinging. Now, I don't think these bees are going to be too aggressive anyway, but it doesn't hurt. Another thing that the smoke does is it covers up pheromone scents. Bees communicate via pheromones, and one that we're particularly concerned about when we're inspecting the hives is their alarm pheromone, which smells like bananas. So if we're out here working and I suddenly smell bananas, that tells me it's time to close up the hive and go away, because, you know, the bees are disturbed and they're ready to attack. But we smoke because the smoke will cover up those pheromones. So one bee might try to signal the others, the signal doesn't get through because the smoke is covering up the smell. So those are the purposes that we smoke. If any other beekeepers have any other explanations of what smoke does and why it helps the bees to stay calm and workable, feel free to post those in comments and enlighten me and others who watch this. So let's see what's going on in here. Okay, so this frame was full of brood before, and I'm not surprised that it's not now, because some of that brood would have emerged out. They're cleaning out the cells. I do see some cells with new eggs in there, so the queen has gone back and is laying eggs in the cells that have been cleaned out, so that's good. So they have some new bees that have emerged, and they're you know, cleaning things out for the next generation. Looking real quick to see if I see any bees actually emerging right now. I do not. That's okay. Take a quick glance on our other side. And we've got more brood over here. One thing that there's a little nectar stored up at the top, but I would like to see more honey stored at the top. They haven't really built out those cells at the top. I'd like to see them build those out and start storing up some more resources up there. Which may be another reason for us to feed them, is for their own resources. I'm not necessarily looking for the queen. If I see her, that'll be great, but I see eggs in there. That tells me she's in there active, which I was not expecting otherwise. One thing that surprised me about this hive is that it's typical that bees will build their brood close to the entrance, and these bees have kind of done the opposite. They started building on the frames furthest from the entrance. You see that first frame they had brood on, and my entrance is a little farther back over here. So, and that started from the time they were in the swarm trap. They started building out that comb on the frame that was at the very back of the trap. On my swarm trap, the entrance is on the side, and those bees went to the far back frame and started building comb, which is interesting because it's contrary to what I have learned about bee behavior, but bees are going to do what they're going to do. Alright, so second frame here. Again, this frame was almost full of capped brood when I inspected it last time. Obviously, there's almost no capped brood now because most of it has emerged, and we're just past that 21 days, so this probably emerged within the last week. So I do see some young larvae in there. In a couple of the cells I see some larvae, and I do see some eggs in some of the cells. The light's not great. I wish I had a good camera to show the eggs here, but we'll see. Maybe I can work something out. But anyway, they're putting out brood there. That's good. See what's on the other side. Again, they don't have a whole lot of honey stored up. Again, maybe a little more reason to feed them so they can, make sure that they are getting enough food for the new bees coming out. I do see some larvae in this side, a little bit of capped brood. Still don't see my queen, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking for her. Now, when I inspected a couple weeks ago, that was pretty much how much they had built out, is those two frames. Push these bees down so I can push these frames together. As I mentioned in another video, this is one of the nice things. One of the nice things about the lay-ins frames is that they touch, so I can push those frames together and the bees in between can go about their work and not be bothered by me up here doing my thing. But the downside is you got to make sure the bees get out of the way before you push the frames together. You kind of learn after you squish a couple bees. Okay, so on this frame they've got kind of a newer brood area there in the middle. Got some capped brood in there. Interesting, I'm not seeing much younger larvae on this one, but yeah, I'm kind of surprised not to see more stages of brood, but the fact that they have, some capped brood on there is good. Again, not a whole lot of nectar stored up on here. You can see on that brood on these cells in the middle that are capped over, they're capped yellow, and those are brood cells. The honey cells, the cappings will be more white. So that's not honey in there, that is brood, or in other words, it's developing bees in the pupa stage inside of those cells. So we got some more brood on here. So got some activity up here in the corner. I wonder if my queen is kind of hiding up there. But again, I'm not trying to find her. I saw eggs. I know she's in there. So I'm not going to spend too much time in here looking for her. Just a little gentle smoke. And you saw me shake my hand there. I wasn't stung, but sometimes when a bee suddenly lands on me, it startles me a little. I don't know their intent. And it looks like beyond here, don't have a whole lot going on. I've got, on this frame, got some, they're building out the comb on there towards the bottom of the frame, building out over there, but you know, nothing stored up and it's not built out enough yet. The next frame is kind of built out the same way. Nothing really stored in there yet. So they're doing all right with brood, but they're not storing up much in terms of resources and nectar and pollen yet, which does not surprise me. Like I said, I haven't seen a whole lot of traffic at the entrance, but now that we have bees emerging, as they go through their life cycle and go through the different jobs of the bee, and I expect to see more worker bees coming out soon and gathering. In the meantime, because they've only built out one more frame, and they are a little short on nectar resources right now, I am going to go ahead and give them a feeder. I do know there's a lot of pollen being brought into my hives right now. I come out in the mornings, watch the bees coming in, and I see them carrying in a lot of pollen. So I'm not going to feed any pollen to the bees, any sort of pollen patties or anything. I'm just going to feed them nectar to help them build out more comb. I think they will probably be able to bring pollen in on their own. So looking at these other combs, they're kind of the same story. They've started to build them out, but nothing significant yet. I am actually going to take one of these frames to move their brood chamber closer to the entrance. I'm going to take one of these frames that is only partially built out, and that one's pretty good. Maybe I'll leave it on the other end. Let's see how this last one is. They've made some pretty good progress on that, which maybe I'll go to my last one that they've done just a little bit of building, and I'll move it to the end. Set this down if the bees will move off the bottom. Go real slow and set it down and let them get out of the way. And some people might watch this and say, hey Monty, you know, and if you watched my video about the conversion hive, you saw I did get stung on my hand. Some people might say, well, Monty, why don't you wear gloves while you're working here? Well, I do have gloves, and depending on the situation, sometimes I do wear them, but a lot of times I don't, and there's a few reasons for that. It's not to show how macho I am, but it does, as I'm working with the bees, it does give more sensitivity. Like as I'm pushing the frames together, if I don't see a bee in between the frames, I might feel that little bit of resistance better with my bare fingers. So it helps me to be more gentle with the bees. I find if I wear gloves, I tend to be a little more brutal in the way that I move the frames around, and brutal is probably the wrong word, but you know, less careful. You know, I just, you know, maybe it's a little bit of a psychological thing that because I'm not concerned about my hands being stung, I just shove stuff around. And that kind of brings us, you know, to an additional reason is that along with the sensitivity part, if you work gentle with the hive, the bees generally respond in kind. You know, if you move slow, work gentle, aren't really knocking things around, and you know, being a brute as you work through it, the bees generally aren't too troubled. Except for if you saw me jump a little bit earlier, that one bee that kind of landed on my hand, which probably was just passing by. Other than that, they haven't really been concerned about me working out here, so it's, you know, hasn't been a big deal at all. And finally, to be honest, I'm not too concerned about getting stung on my hands. Something a lot of people don't know is that bee venom is therapeutic for arthritis, and I do have some arthritis in my joints, and so if I get stung, it's a day or two of swelling and discomfort. I'll admit that, but then it's a week to two of you know, my hands being more fluid in their motion. So I exchange one for the other. And a lot of people pay good money. It's called apitherapy. Pay good money for bee venom therapy, and sometimes just purposefully getting stung in specific areas. Now, I am not an apitherapist, but if anybody wants to contact me and pay me some money to come and get stung in my backyard, I'll be glad to do that for you. So hit me up. So anyway, back to the job at hand. So I moved that one frame that was partially built out to the end, moving their brood chamber closer to the entrance. To be honest, why do I do that? I like having more of an empty frame on the end. It helps me when I come around and just do quick hive checks. I can, peek in the hive and see how well they're building out that last frame to determine whether I need to add additional frames. But does it matter to the bees? Probably not. They would keep building on the frames that they have available and work their way back to the entrance naturally. I don't know, maybe I'm being a little bit too type A with the bees, but mostly it's so that when I pull off that cover board, or that divider board, I can just glance in there and see how much they built out that frame to see, if they might need for me to add more frames in the future. So now I'll push these back. No bees in between, we're good. Put our cover board back. Now I'll go ahead and add my feeder in here. Now this is a frame feeder. It hangs in there just like a frame. It's got 3 compartments. It's filled with about 1.7 quarts of 1:1:1 syrup. And what I mean is a lot of beekeepers feed 1:1. That is 1 part sugar to 1 part water by weight. I feed, based on Dr. Leo Shurashkin's recommendations, I feed 1 part water, 1 part sugar, 1 part honey. So, so that's what the bees will be getting to help them build out their frames. Through each of those 3 compartments, I do have a piece of wood on top. I cut little boards out of cedar to put on top because it has a texture on here for the bees to walk on, but it's a little extra thing to help keep bees from being from drowning in there. After a week, I'll check on that feeder and take it out. I expect they will have it emptied within a week, but and if not, I'll probably still take it out. Just because I've found that small hive beetles, which can be a pest in the hive, and they can wreak havoc on the comb, and especially on any honey that's stored in the comb, they tend to congregate around the feeders. It's an easy place for them to get food, and which is what they're really after in the hive. And so I don't leave the feeders in there, very long. Even after it's empty, the small hive beetles tend to be attracted to it. So I don't want to create that refuge for them any more than necessary. So we'll give the bees that, let them, use this sugar syrup mix to build more comb, and also they might start building up some of their resources that will help them get through winter, and we'll see how they go from there. So thanks for coming along with me on this inspection. I hope that this has been interesting to you. If you have any questions, feel free to post those in the comments, and I will respond as well as I can. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.